So on today's episode, an ex-professional tennis player shares her journey from helping her partner beat cancer to launching and scaling a hugely successful, purpose-driven digital native super brand. Welcome to the 2X eCommerce podcast show. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell. On today's episode, I'm joined by Kristel de Groot, the co-founder and CMO of Your Super, a superfood brand that aims to make healthy eating more accessible. Kristel shares her journey from being a professional tennis player to starting a health-focused brand, the importance of clean ingredients, and the role of retention in building a successful e-commerce business. Here's a bit of the backstory of the brand. Your Super was founded in 2015 when Kristel's partner Michael was diagnosed with cancer at just the age of 24. After he beat cancer and went into remission, Kristel painstakingly ensured that his diet was ultra clean, healthy, and vegan. This experience helped the couple to create a brand that made it easy for people to incorporate superfoods into their daily diets. They started by creating a simple 7-day detox plan that included their signature superfood mix. The mix contained 7 of the most nutrient-dense superfoods in the world and designed to help boost energy levels, support immune system, and improve overall health. The brand quickly gained a following and expanded their product line into additional superfoods, including mixes designed specifically for immunity, gut health, and energy. Today, Your Super is a thriving 50 million plus in revenue business, believe it or not, largely from their e-commerce DTC operations, with a mission to making healthy eating easy and accessible for everyone. So why should you listen to this episode? First, you're going to learn about the importance of building a brand. Kristel stresses the significance of creating a strong brand image and how it has been a key factor in the success of Your Super. She explains how having a brand with a clear message and values helps build trust with customers and differentiate the company from competitors. You're going to understand the value of customer feedback. Kristel emphasizes the importance of listening to and acting on customer feedback and how it has helped Your Super to improve its products and customer experience. She shares strategies on how to collect and analyze customer feedback and how to use it to make informed business decisions. Thirdly, Kristel discusses the benefits of using natural whole food ingredients in Your Super's products and how it has helped differentiate the brand in a crowded health and wellness space. She explains the importance of transparency in ingredient sourcing and the impact it's had in building trust with customers. You're going to also gain inspiration from Kristel's entrepreneurial story overall. Kristel shares her journey from being a professional tennis player to becoming, an entrepreneur that's really thriving. She provides insights on the challenges she's faced along the way and how she's overcome them, as well as advice on how to stay motivated and focused on your goals. So if you want a masterclass on the importance of building a brand with a clear mission, the power of customer feedback, and the value of prioritizing retention over acquisition, among other valuable tips for building a successful e-commerce business, then pay attention. So without further ado, let's get started. Hey, Kristel, welcome to the 2X eCommerce podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I know we're going to be talking about some really, really cool stuff.
Brilliant stuff. First things first, where are you calling in from?
I'm in New York at the moment, and this year is a funny year. We're living everywhere and nowhere, but everywhere basically 1 or 2 months. And right now it's New York.
Yeah, I actually thought you're going to say California, but New York. How's the weather there?
It's literally snowing.
Okay, all right, okay. We'll move right on to
that part.
to the next question. But speaking to what you guys have done in Your Super. It's just been phenomenal. I don't want to take too much light. You're going to tell your story, right? But let's jump back to your backstory. Who are you? You could even speak a bit to Michael, your co-founder and partner. I just want to know who you are, where you grew up. You certainly sound European. not American. Could you give us a background on the
Yeah.
child, Kristel, the child, to Kristel, the e-commerce entrepreneur, the food and beverage entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Dutch, so that's why I have this great accent. Michael's German, so I have some German accent mixed in as well. But yeah, I grew up in Holland, very pretty normal youth actually, around Amsterdam in a slightly smaller town. And the one thing that really did, a couple of things actually. One is that I was a crazy tennis player, and from a very young age, played a lot of tennis. And I think playing sports at a young age teaches you a lot of things. And went in the end, actually played college tennis in the US for like 3.5 years. So, that has been a thread for my life. And Michael and me always joke when we stopped, kind of stopped playing professional tennis, like we put that energy in our business, right? A little bit that obsessiveness that we used to have in our youth already, we put that in. He's a tennis player as well. We met actually in college, both playing tennis. Another really distinctive thing from my youth is that I had eczema, actually already from my baby on. And what it taught me from a really young age, like I remember even in my, when I was 10 years old or something, my mom also used to take me to more holistic doctors and everything, is what I realized is that if I eat something, I would either get a rash or I wouldn't get a rash. So like that made that connection between what you eat and your health and your body. I was like, oh, there is a connection between those two, right? And that was just so apparent, which I think is, we all kind of have to learn that, right? That it really does matter what you eat, like you are what you eat. So it has been a journey. Met Michael in college, and then really where the story from Your Super actually started was when he was sick. So he was sick when he was 24. I was 22 at the moment. He got cancer, and that kind of like put our, both our lives upside down. He had surgery, he went for chemo, and during that time, I watched the movie Forks Over Knives, and that kind of changed. That was such an aha moment. In that movie, they talk about epigenetics, and if you eat plant-based, how you actually, you can turn off some of those genes and reduce your risk for cancer. And I was just like, well, my mom had cancer when I was younger. He has cancer. It's like, okay, I'm plant-based. Literally the next day. And for Michael, which is so interesting, and I'm sure more people can relate to this who went through this, like you go for chemo, then you're cancer-free, right? Your doctor says, okay, you're cancer-free. And I on purpose say cancer-free because he was not healthy, right? He lost all his hair. He was in the worst, like as an athlete, like his immunity was down. He had no energy, everything. And that's really where the journey of health started. That's kind of where he was more open. I could step in. It's like, okay, as a health nut, it's like, we're going to do a detox. We're going to eat all these plants. I had all the superfoods in my cupboard. And, I kind of dragged him to Whole Foods and tried to make him buy all those 30 bags as well. He was like, this is too expensive, too complicated, not doing this. And I just had an empty jar and just threw everything together. A lot of greens, especially for him. I said, whatever you do, just take this every single day. And he did, and he started to feel better. And that's really where it clicked, where we're like, okay, there are a lot more people like Michael, right, who do want to use some of those very powerful ingredients. And where superfoods are a really easy way to just get more plants into your diet, but they don't necessarily know where to start. So that's really was where our journey started, to actually say, hey, maybe we're gonna, slowly start a business out of this.
Really, really powerful stuff there. First of all, tennis. I played tennis not professionally, but the one thing I've picked up from tennis is the fact that it's an individual sport. Despite it being really a team sport behind the scenes, it's down to you when you're on the court.
Yeah.
The question I have is, how's that sort of sense of ownership, complete ownership, on court, translated in business? And what's the name of the movie you said you watched?
The movie is Forks Over Knives.
Okay.
I recommend. I mean, there are a couple of good movies. I think Forks Over Knives is a great one. I think Game Changers is another fantastic movie that I always recommend people to watch. But tennis, it's very individual. Actually, only in college for me, it really became more of a team sport. But growing up, if you go to tournaments, everything, you're just by yourself, right? So I think learn so many things. From you learn winning, you learn losing, from points to games, right? Like all of
Mhm.
it. I think you learn so much discipline from it as well. And I think it's this piece of it's independence. I'm a very independent person actually, and it's funny because I've sometimes, as the company scaled further, right, and the team also became big, I also had to learn to like work more in teams. And because working by myself is something that goes very easily, which probably also
Mhm.
part of tennis, just like, okay, I'm by myself, I'm just doing my thing, like go for it. But as we know, as a company scales and you get more people, it's also really important, like, okay, how do you actually do, both as well? So it has been, um, so many different things, but I think it's that piece of just up and down, which I think you have in a startup so much, right? Because from the outside it always looks like one big success and we only hear the success
Yeah.
stories. But it's not that like that, right? Business is only ups and downs, within sometimes even within a day you hear 20, you hear two amazing things and two things where you like kind of are just slapped in the faces. But you just keep going, and I
Mm.
think that's the pieces that we've learned, and I think it's very much also a mental aspect, a kind of a resilience that we've learned in our youth.
Okay. Okay. We're going to do an exercise now. We're going to go back in time. We're going to get some timestamps clear.
Yeah,
First things first is Michael's diagnosis of cancer and where he was. Was he in college in the United States? Because in my notes, I have the fact that you started operations initially in Europe.
yeah,
Just want to sort of match that up.
yeah.
And
So that is he was diagnosed 10 years ago,
wow.
so 2013, early in the year. And he just finished his master's. He did his master's in Germany, and he actually just came back from a kind of a 4-month India, kind of where he finished up his master's.
Hmm.
So on top of the world, kind of, right? We kind of come out of college, you just studied abroad again in India, and for us, like even just being athletes, right, there you have this full trust in your body, because you're very much, as playing a lot of sports, you are just more in touch with your body too.
Hmm.
So I think that was for him a huge, like you lose trust in your body there as well.
Hmm.
But back to the timestamp. So that happened then, and then the business we started a year after that. So that has been now 9 years ago.
Hmm.
We started actually in Amsterdam originally. We had a little apartment there, and we started mixing different powders by hand, and we had a little certified organic room. So really, I mean, I was 23 years old when we started the business. I was an absolute baby who didn't know anything, never really had a real job besides some internships. And then a year after that we moved to Berlin, so like we actually have been in different European countries there as well.
Hmm. Hmm. And did tennis have to sort of take a back seat at the time? Was tennis exclusively, this is what we're going to do in college, and that's it? Or were there other prospects of tennis beyond college where you decided, look, this is bigger than tennis?
I think for both of us, and it's interesting now, right? 10 years, I mean, you're older and everything, you look back. But at that time, we were both pretty clear that after, like we loved that tennis gave us the opportunity to, with scholarship study in the US, and that felt really good. And we had a fantastic time. But I think we were also very clear on like, okay, we didn't want to live that life of traveling across the world to all the little tournaments and to all, we only see like the top 10, and it's such a fantastic life, right? But to really
Hmm.
get there, that's a long road ahead, and we didn't want to do that. I think we both also really we're excited to also start that other part of our professional career, and trying to figure that piece out as well.
Well, and then you took an even more challenging route, which is entrepreneurship and building out, this fantastic, good for you brand. Okay, so it's right now you have a lot of SKUs, a lot of SKUs. How did you make a decision on the first few SKUs? Did it align with some of the stuff you were making, Michael? over his recovery from chemo.
Yeah.
I'd just like to know what your initial products were and how you brought them to market
Yeah,
10 years ago.
you're going to be shocked. There were 7.
7. Okay.
My first recommendation for anyone starting a business, start with 1 or with 3 SKUs, not more. Don't start with 7. Big mistake. Little did we know. We started with 7. One of them was super green that we still have, and that was very similar to what I made Michael originally. So that was definitely part of it. And not a lot of people know this actually, but all the way in the beginning, we actually had something on the website built out where you could mix your own mix. So people could choose actually 10 scoops of superfoods and kind of like personalize your own mix. However, what we quickly realized is that people were actually buying our pre-mixed mixes. And if they did mix something together, I was like scooping it in for them. And I was like, this is going to taste really, really bad. So people didn't really know how these ingredients tasted and how to combine them also for health benefits. So that pretty quickly went kind of off the website again.
Textbook example of, the customers really do not know what they want.
No, they really don't know what they want. They saw us as the expert and wanted us, right, to put that together.
That's right.
And simplify it for them. And like I said, we were so young, we didn't necessarily know what we were doing, and we have done this every step ourselves, right? From mixing the products together, we went to the farmers markets. I used to pack and ship the boxes out myself. I did the customer service. I like every piece in the business over the years. We have touched. Probably at some point we definitely split up more. But we've done a lot of things by ourselves to kind of learn, and then from there on, give it to someone else.
Right. So, in terms of roles, how have you split your roles as partners? I'm going to ask this a double barrel question within the business, and how is it? How would you, working with your partner, with your life partner at the same time? How do you sort of split business from the personal?
Yeah, we always get that question, but
Stop.
I know everyone always has this big question mark on their forehead. It's like, how do you do this? In the business, it went quite naturally. I took on more the marketing, e-com selling and product innovation. It was a little more split, but like more really the formulation, and like as I was more the health person, like that was really more me. And then we always joke anything but marketing was Michael, but like more the supply chain, finance, HR was all more on his side. And then in life, how we kind of, this sounds maybe funny, but when we came out of college, right, he spoke German, I spoke Dutch, and we struggled at that time, which it makes me laugh at this point, but we're like, how do we ending up in the same country? Like if we don't speak the same languages, and like getting a job with only speaking English in Amsterdam is not as easy as when you speak the native language. It's very, in Germany the same. Mm-hmm. So for us, starting a business together also kind of solved that too, where we're like, well, at least we can live in the same country, we can spend time together. So that was very much also a piece of it, where we're like, okay, this is great. And I think that we really like spending time together. So obviously it's not always easy. I think there are pieces of years where we just talked about business, and we've learned to balance it out more. And but we get to work together, which we really enjoy. And the tough part is that we are so direct with each other, right? Because you're so close. So I think in a business setting, sometimes you might have a little bit more of a business etiquette, and we just don't have that. Mm-hmm. And there's a beauty to that and a strength to it, because you're so radically honest with each other that sometimes certain things that someone else will probably not give you that feedback, like you just tell each other that, but it's also sometimes hard, right? So because mm-hmm. it is so direct. So it's something we've learned, but at the same time, we're so grateful that we get to spend all that time with each other as well.
Yeah. And times outside of business, do you speak about business?
Yeah. because I think it flows, and I think life and work is very much, I don't know, for me, it's not completely separated. Sometimes I wish it would be, but I think it's, our work is also our life's mission. So
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, like I truly care about it. So like, I think because of that, it probably feels more like, it's just like all integrates into each other.
Yeah, if you think about the old days, the old agrarian days where everybody was kind of like a farmer, yeah, you lived where you worked, and it was work, and then you eat, and then you play. It's just everything was kind of like integrated anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about striking that balance, really.
Well, isn't it funny? Or a lot of us work now also from home, right?
From
So
home,
it's kind of
exactly.
all happening that way, anyways.
It's full circle. It's full
Yeah.
circle. The other thing I've noticed here on your website is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 7, 20, 21 SKUs. Has this always kind of like been the case with 21 SKUs for a huge business? From an
Yeah,
e-com context.
we basically, I think we have right now like 12 mixes, really individual. At some point, we also had stick packs. That was never online super successful for us. People rather just buy the full can. So that is something we learned over time. But a huge unlock for us has been the bundles. Especially and that is also where you see why we have more SKUs. So we make these programs and bundles on where we basically, for example, one of our heroes is like the detox bundle, that contains all these different mixes plus a 5-day program on how to use the mixes and what to eat for 5 days. And we actually did a clinical study on this as well. It's shocker, it works. Right. And it's those has for us been really unlocked because, as you know, in e-com, right, like your AOV, especially on the first order, is so important.
So important.
And that's, put our AOV from a first order originally, right, when we started was maybe, and we struggled in the beginning too, it was like 50, 60. But then with a detox bundle and really advertising and focusing more on getting that first order to that bundle, suddenly jumped to over 100. Right. So, then your CAC and, your first order ratio becomes so different right away that it made us, really helped us to also scale faster. And it makes it easier for people to use and know what to do.
Exactly. I think so, especially when they have a variety of products. So if they can test, there's a bundle here with like 5 products: your Forever Beauty, your Plant Protein, Magic Mushroom, Plant Collagen, and Moon Balance. You get the pack, you try everything, and you might just stick with 2. You might stick with 3 tubs, and that also sets a tone. I was speaking to an entrepreneur who their AOV, which they've established, they're a small business, is like $30 or £30 rather, and their trial pack is like £7, and they're just finding problems with moving £7 purchasers to £30 subscribers, and like a £7 customer is not a £30 customer. It's just, you need to set the tone up front, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So we used to have a trial pack as well. It was a little more expensive. I think it was 15 euros or something. And we had, from the 7 products we started with, 7 little sachets in there. But exactly whenever we started to push that, I was like, this doesn't add up, right? Because they get that. And then obviously not everyone is going to come back and buy a full can. So over time, we've killed that SKU. Like what I did originally is that I did, I think it can be interesting if it's, not too expensive to produce for us. It just economically didn't make sense. Add it to the order as a freebie. Great. Right. Then it becomes this really interesting marketing campaign, which I think can be fantastic, right? Like, hey, you get this if you order over this amount. And like, then you use it, right, as a marketing tactic. Exactly. But selling it on its own and like going for that low AOV, I think in the e-com world we live now, right, where the CACs only have been getting higher the last couple of years, I think that's a tough one to kind of break. And to your point, it is a different customer.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the fact about of tubes. This sachets or tubes. I know there's a difference between sachets and tubes, but I don't know that I don't have the terminology for the tubes.
Yeah, we call
The
them cans. I don't know if that's the
okay,
right. We
okay,
call them cans.
yeah. So the perceived value there versus no, I mean like sachets. When you have like sugar sachets when you go to a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Some food brands tend to put each serving in some sort of tube or a sachet, really a sachet.
Yeah. Yeah.
The perceived value is different from a sachet, like a pack of 30 versus a tub with like 37 servings, right? I thought
And
you
yeah, what I think in Europe, because it's very interesting, right? We operate in the European and the US market. In Europe, people just don't like it naturally already for the environment. Like I think they're way more sensitive to that, and I
yeah.
think they really do want to do good, right? Whereas in the US, I think people are more. You see it also more in supermarkets, so people are more used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think for retail, having sachets makes total sense, right? Putting it next to a cashier, like
Yeah.
pick up and like the product trial.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super powerful. I think for ecom, I think it's just, and obviously it's the nature of the product too. Not everyone wants to the whole day take this little sachet of superfoods everywhere they go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often what we've learned is that they use it in their morning routine when they're still at home. So like that is more their use case. When they travel, yes, there might be this occasional like trip, family trip or holiday or, business trip that might be slightly different, but then they might still just take one or two of the cans that they use most often. So I think in the end of the day, every business is going to be different. I think what's super important, and you hear me a lot talking about the customer, is that you really truly understand who is your customer and how are they using them, when are they using your products, how are they using the products, and to like just really get to know them. What I've done in the early days, I did so many customer calls where actually I would just interview customers for half an hour on Zoom and just ask them everything about like the products, their life. And I just wanted to know who they are and their story. And I've recorded a lot of those stories too. And some of those stories we've actually used in our advertising too, right? So like, it's funny how like, even though that was not necessarily the intention, because I just wanted to get to know them. Like their stories were so powerful that I got so inspired by their stories. I was like, we need to share these actually.
Okay, for listeners who want to get some context, how big is your super from a revenue standpoint, if you're allowed to share that?
Yeah, so we were in 2021 like 60 million. So that's also on the web somewhere. So that's to be found. So we grew as a little Dutch European founder. I think we grew a good size business.
Little, I get that.
But it has been, what I've learned, it's not so much about the revenue is just a number, right? I think for me, it's way more about what are the amount of people we're impacting. And I think that's always the number also internally. And I've had to remind myself over years, right? Because if you raise money and like the game of business you can get so stuck on that number. But I think it's really, and on ecom, right? You see all these numbers, but it's important to realize what do these numbers actually mean? Because I think business is actually very much also like actually Tony Robbins says it, but I would truly agree. It's like more of a spiritual game. Yeah. Right? Like they're real people and you're touching their lives, and it's like truly understanding and having that right intention of, okay, how am I helping them and how can I actually do better?
Yeah, that's why I made the decision to focus more on actual physical products versus like software, as a service. It just to me, I feel more connected in a way with physical products.
Yeah, we just make our lives a little more difficult, but it's it's just, I mean, and there's this piece of when you create something, right, and you build something, you can touch it. It's like it just hits different.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Okay, so just playing the timestamp game again, how long were you bootstrapped for, and when did you realize, geez, for us to make this impact we're looking to make in the world, we need to raise capital?
Yeah, so we raised for a year long, we basically only did went to farmers market, blended by hand, and it was fantastic time, really hard work. And about a year after, we did that, and we're like, okay, to actually make the next step, we need to actually start producing something, right? And if you want to produce something, obviously the quantities were a little higher. So then we raised a very small round. I think it was like 100K or something from friends and family. And it was funny because we thought that, well, this is it. We never need to raise money anymore. This is great. Well, little did we know. And by the way, I think that's so important for people to realize. You don't need to know, right? Sometimes just being that, like, we were so naive. And I think it's great. You don't need to know what you need to know 10 years down the line, right? Just start with step 1 and 2. Don't worry about step 100. You're going to figure it out over time. And I think we often get stuck on steps way further down the line and trying to figure those out without just starting with step 1 and 2. And then I think it was a year later, we raised a little seed round from 500 startups. We did an ecom training. Their Asian fund invested, which has been funny. And the Kylie who invested was also his very big plan. Was a plant-based, so he just saw it because they normally invest more in tech. And we did an ecom training with them, and I think that's really where I started to learn more about e-commerce, because obviously we were trying to figure it out, but we had a 1-month immersion.
What year was this? Sorry for cutting you short.
That was 2000. I want to say 2016, if I say that correctly, or 2007. Yeah, I think end 2016. Yeah. And then in 2017, we were. That's when they made the decision we wanted to actually go to the US market. We were actually struggling in the European market. I think we were very early. I think in Germany, which was the market we focused on most, we were in Berlin at the time. We moved to Berlin. We were still explaining what a smoothie was.
Oh, wow.
So let alone tell people, trying to sell them powder, right? And oh, you need to use wheatgrass. Oh, you need to use maca. Oh. I mean, it was just so many steps further.
Yeah.
And we did see that we got, a bunch of orders from the US, 10, 15% of orders were from the US. So we called customers up, was why are you ordering from us? And they're you're not using stevia, it's so clean. Oh, you're sourcing different. And that was kind of this moment where we're okay, let's just, and it was very much a feeling also. It's let's just go to the US. And we had some European investors, right? And not a lot, but some, and, just mentors and stuff. And they're no, you first have to make the European market work before you're allowed to go to the US. And we're just no, we're just going to go.
Just do it.
We're just going to go. We knew it. Logically, maybe it didn't make sense. And it was, again, naive. But at the same time, it just felt like we just needed to do it. And, US is really the market that scaled, initially. It still took us, we basically moved there in 2017, more launched the US business around beginning to 18. And it still took us, 4 or 5 months to figure it out. But once we kind of had that unlock with the bundles and understand how to storytell, people were ready and more, we didn't have to explain some of those basics to that market initially. So that really helped. And it's the funny thing is that Europe also started to scale 1 or 2 years after that. But we were just too early.
There's a lot to unpick from there. First things was what you said about you don't need to know, and it's okay. You don't need to know till you know. Just learn, experience, let the novelty come in, and face the new information and process it and go forward with it.
Yeah.
The second was around 500 startups. It's so odd to me that first of all the Asian arm of it invested in you, but they tend to do tech. But did you have other e-commerce or consumer brand in your cohort, or was it just you?
No, it was us. And we this is actually kind of a funny story, because we were literally all over the place. In the beginning, we didn't know if we were only e-com brand or also retail. We didn't know what market. And somehow we ended up having a booth on the Web Summit in Ireland. Wow. And we did a lot of crazy stuff. And it was fantastic, but it was hilarious because we were standing there between all these tech companies and we were handing out smoothies from our little booth that we were blending up. And it was literally, 1 meter. And we would give people the smoothies and they were like, what do you do? And we're like, which is obviously what we did, but like we said, we source all the most powerful ingredients from all over the world. We put them in these mixes and they're all like, wow, it's so fascinating. It must be so hard, like a physical product. And I was looking at all these tech companies and I was like, I don't understand one bit of what you guys are doing. So it was just, we were such an odd bird there. And somehow we met Kylie from 500 startups there, and he was plant-based and he loved, like making, our products, and he always made smoothies in the morning. So there was just like this instant connection. And he took a chance on us. And I think it's just funny how sometimes putting yourself in those situations, right? Like, I don't know, like I remember we were standing on the street and we're like, oh, shall we go to this one more party, or tired? And we're just like, let's, what if because we knew he would be there and we wanted to talk to him, and like, what if he invests? And we're like, oh, okay, let's just go. Right. And we literally on the dance floor connected for the smoothies. But that's just like life, right? You need to just put yourself in those situations, and like life, just follow your gut instinct and like your intuition.
That's so powerful. I think that's the biggest point you've made in this conversation, and it's not exactly an actionable point. You just have to try. You have to try and try and try. It's not like an exact point where it's like, to increase AOV you need to do this. It's like just create opportunities by meeting and connecting with people you never know, and serendipity comes for those who expose themselves to it.
Yeah, and I think business is I think that's the same for whether it's hiring, business decisions. I think we have this tendency in our world to always go right brain and like logic, and like, oh, I need to look at the data because that's where the answer is. And like, I'm not saying the data is not important, because obviously it's very supportive, but like to truly make a decision, in the end, you just have to make a decision, and you're not going to find the answer anywhere but, in yourself actually. And I think I have learned to trust my feeling, because if I look back where I have not and listened only to my mind, it has, those are sometimes just the wrong decisions, and not always, right? But I think it's very important to match the two up together. And I think we don't value our intuition in business, and I don't think we get taught to listen to that often enough. I think it's kind of ignored, like, oh yeah, you're just like this, like, I don't know. It's just, I don't even know why it is that way, but I think it's just really important to like really value that piece in business as well.
It is, absolutely. I liked a tweet this morning from Rand Fishkin from SEO Moz back in the days. And just reading it out now is like, the best marketing opportunities are usually the least measurable. And that just resonated, with me, which is what you just said. Okay, so another sort of daft, weird question I want to ask is like, how do you make a powder? Particularly, I can understand if you're like a nutritionist and, you've been taught in a, in university or in a course, but, as an individual, most of us just make smoothies, right? You put it in the juicer, you make smoothie and you say it's healthy. You put your kale, you put, your matcha, whatever you want to put in there, and you make a juice. But a powder, to just come up with a powder as an individual, and, have a room that's, certified organic and do it. Where did you learn to make powders?
Yeah. So, I think a couple of pieces there. One is I do come, right, like my mom and aunt are molecular nutritionists. So I do have that background in my family of just learning about health and food and health, right, and that combination. And I had them to go back and lean on. Over time, I have become a health coach, which is not a nutritionist, right? But like I've always been that nerd. So I think, yes, I studied business, but I was only reading health articles. So I was very much immersing myself in, like kind of what was happening and always learning about new things. And that I think is a piece of like, you can actually, like, you don't always have to learn something in uni, right? You can also teach yourself things of just like deep diving and educating yourself. Super sidetrack, right? But I just had a baby, and I can tell you a lot of things about birth and pregnancy because I read like over 10 books, and I'm probably a really big nerd on this topic now. And people are like, "Why do you know all this stuff?" It's like, because I want to know. I want to be empowered. And but basically from there with the powders, like I was using a lot of these products myself, right? But always in individual bags. So I used spirulina, I did use a wheatgrass, and so I was always interested in those products. And then when we started, I used Google, right, trying to figure out where would I find this kind of ingredients. And then the first thing I kind of figured out is, right, oh, you have, right, suppliers that have a range of big, like they would have like 30, 40 different ingredients. So that's kind of how we started off, because we would buy like 5 kilograms in our little room. And what we did learn then already is that I remember very particularly, we ordered a wheatgrass from Germany that was very expensive, and a wheatgrass from China that was very cheap. A huge difference in pricing. But I was like, okay, let's order both, because I'm very curious about the difference. And one was green, smelled like grass, and one was kind of yellowish, didn't smell like anything. And that was such a pivotal moment in our business, because we're like, oh, where we're going to source these ingredients is going to change completely how it tastes, right? Because a lot of the mixes in the market, they always add flavors and stevia, and then always like flavor it up. And we just use 5-6 ingredients, and that's it. So it's very, very clean. And they still taste good because of the way we source, right? So we kind of split that supplier nowadays, and we go and work with people from countries where, those ingredients are originally used and grown. So maca comes from Peru. Spirulina we actually get from Chile, and acai, right, comes from Brazil. So it's like, different parts of the world, some local as well, right? Some wheatgrass and the barley grass is very easily sourced from Germany or from the US, right? So if we can source that, we will. And what we've learned though over time is that it's best to get the powders from the countries itself, right? So like if something is grown, you kind of want to dry it right away and mill it to preserve most of the nutrients. And also if you think about it from an environmental standpoint, it's a lot better for the environment to ship powder than it is to ship the whole fruit and make powder from it. So basically we work with partners across the world where we want to, our shatavari or turmerics, right? They come from India. Like we get the powders to our either production facility in the US or in Germany. And that's where everything gets mixed and then basically filled in different cans. So we have two supply chains basically set up.
And so when you say two supply chains, one in the US and then one in Europe.
Yeah.
And so your facilities in Europe and America are mixing facilities essentially.
Exactly.
And your edge, your competitive advantage is the visibility of your supply chain and just the quality. You're not going to have any nasties. It's
nothing,
like premium stuff coming through.
Added. And I think what's especially in the US, which is very normal for most brands, right, is that you go to a production facility and they source for you. However, their incentive is very different. Their incentive is purely to buy it the cheapest and sell it the most expensive to you. Yeah. Right. And that is just something that is very different. Like we basically we have a whole list of questions before we even take, one of our suppliers on from one of those countries. And then we always want to have the option to visit. And we've visited quite some farms over the years. And it says something if they're like, no, we don't want you to visit, blah, blah. It's like, oh, okay, if you never want us to come over, we're not going to be working together. And we're not coming over to copy your business. We just come over because we're truly interested and want to connect to the farmers and, just want to make sure everything is good. That's all. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. That supply chain piece is important. Is that Michael? Where does that, is that Michael? Is that you? Who's
yeah.
Whose territory?
It's more supply chain side is definitely more on Michael's side.
Mm-hmm.
I have visited their farms too because they're the best trips, so I'm definitely coming. And I have to
Why
shoot
not?
content, right? So it's also obviously from the consumer side, it's a really important piece as well. So I obviously over the years, and we had actually one of our first hires was a supply chain manager, and he's fantastic, and that piece has been so core of building it up. And many people say, how do you find these people? And I'm like, I don't even know, right? Over time, you just like, whether it's Google, whether it's going to different fairs, and you just keep finding these like people who really grow ingredients just the right way, right? It's organic, everything you do, but they also grow it like often like in a biodynamic way, right? Where did they really look at just everything, how the soil, that everything works together, that crops are rotated. And we don't even really talk about that, but like that is for a lot of the ingredients, that is the case, where it's not just a monoculture. So it's it's fun. And I mean, if you meet the farmers, how much love goes into food, I just always want to remind people, right? Even if something is in a package, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter who it grows. And there goes a lot of hard work and love in those products.
Absolutely. We operate a food and beverage brand. It's called Lean Caffeine, and another called Clean and Pure. And, it's just giving me more respect, for farmers, the absolute lifeblood of this planet, essentially, for all of us, and we should be really thankful.
I agree.
Yeah. So speaking of your supply chain, your expertise, your in-depth knowledge on essentially nutrition as a medicine, that's the way I see it, and going all plant-based. You have a book. It's called Your Super Life. It's due to be released in the US sometime in April. I believe it's the 14th, or is it the 17th of April?
18th of April.
18th of April. Yeah. And then it's going to be released in the UK on the 25th of May. Okay, so what's it all about? I hear it's plant-based recipes. What should, I'm going to link to it in the show notes. What should listeners, get excited or be expect to get from Your Super Life?
I mean, there's a lot of different things in there. I think it's not just a book for plant-based people. I think the recipes itself are very simple, a lot of under 20 minutes, because I think we all just want to eat more plants, right? Like that's really the core. So even if you just change one meal, right? Or if you say, hey, it's one day per week or one meal a day, like start just switching it up. In the recipes itself, we integrate also superfoods. We do some singular superfoods. There's also a page if you want to use your super mixes, but you can use the book completely actually without your super mixes. And then really a key pieces in there is we talk about your super way of eating, which is like 9 principles basically that we talk about, very basic things. Basically, you can start doing to just like change the way you eat. I often have a tendency to focus on, I call it the crowding out principle, where it's not about what you cannot eat, but it's more focusing on, let's focus on eating more of the right things, right? Let's just all focus on that. I think the society we live in, we often, are all focused still on counting calories, counting fats, counting carbs, protein. It's all those macro ingredients where actually our health often is way more ingrained in the micronutrients, right? Like our vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, enzymes, antioxidants. And we kind of forget about that. And those are found in plants, right? They're found in like your fruit and veggies. And 9 out of 10 people in the US, 8 out of 10 people in Europe don't eat enough fruit and vegetables every single day. And we're just talking about the minimum required amount, right? Where we actually see in studies, the more you eat of them, right? So also over your minimum required amount, the healthier you do get, right? So there's so much power in just eating that variety of color, right? And eating those real fruit and vegetables. So that is really the core piece of the book of like, our story is in there. We explain superfoods. We talk about your super way of eating. I'm a huge fan of teaching people how to make their own recipes with whatever you have in the kitchen. So there are 10 sections in there of just like the how-to sections, I call them, of how to make a pasta, right, in 5 steps, how to make a curry in 5 steps with whatever veggies you have at home. I hope just I truly inspire and like can really, teach people something and that they just start eating more plants, because I've personally felt the difference myself, right? I healed my eczema. I changed a lot of things in my health, but I've also seen it from hundreds and hundreds, well, probably a million customers at this point from your super, and difference it can make. Also doing the detox and just really eating more plants, what it can do. And I want everyone to experience that.
Incredible. I'm not plant-based, but I eat a lot of plants. I and I encourage the kids too.
Yeah.
And that's because just watching my parents, my parents are in their 70s, mid-70s now, and just eating vegetables, taking fruits has always been a part of our life. And it didn't go away. And, I'm very thankful that I don't eat much junk food
Yeah.
per se, but it's not the norm. It's not the norm at all. It's not the norm at all. My kids have never had a McDonald's, and I have an 11-year-old boy. I have a 6-year-old, son, and I have a 2-year-old son who's going to be two in about next week.
Amazing.
So yeah, they've never ever had a McDonald's in their life, or KFC, or they've had a KFC, but they haven't had a McDonald's. And I pride myself with that. So yeah, we would definitely link to it. I really like your perspective on micronutrients. We don't speak about micronutrients enough. We talk about macro, particularly in the health. When you read mainstream health, magazines and stuff like that.
And to your point, right? Health then often becomes only about the way you look.
Correct.
And I think health is about how you feel, how much energy do you have.
Correct.
That is true health, right? It's not about having the most ripped body. You don't actually have to be healthy to have a ripped body. Those are two completely different stories, right? And I think that is a shift that needs to happen in our mind. And it's not about like, okay, I have to lose weight, I have to look a certain way. It's like, no, like, let's just really fuel your body with the right things, so you have the energy and that you feel mentally good, so you can actually do the things you want to do in your life, because that's actually where it's really about.
Yeah. And I think empowering people with this knowledge, because a lot of people say, I'm time poor. I don't have the time. And if you say, hey, look, this would only take 20 minutes of your time. Just make sure you get the ingredients, and they're not expensive, they're accessible in stores, which is quite interesting. Just do it. So is your Super Life a recipe book format? Is it like a big colorful one, or is
it's a hardcover?
Okay.
And it has beautiful pictures, which I'm very excited about.
Yes.
Because I think it's important also to see what you're going to make, right? It just hits different. So yeah, that's definitely all there. And then also like from meal plans, recommended grocery lists, like there's just a lot. There's a lot of information.
So it's certainly a book that should be in your kitchen library, essentially.
Yeah. Definitely.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's go back to more the unit economics of your super, which is kind of like, what is the geographic mix now in 2023 in terms of where, obviously I would think it's US, but what's the percentage? And then from I just searched for your super, and I'm seeing your super in many marketplaces. Target, Amazon. What's distribution like? If you don't mind sharing, and then what is the geo split?
Yeah, so it's 75% US, 25% Europe.
What about the UK?
Within Europe, UK is our second biggest market. So it's Germany first, then the UK, then Holland, which I'm proud Dutchy. No, but I think the pieces though, like for a long time, we were very much only DTC and very much focused on that.
And from a DTC perspective, how big did you grow being pure play DTC?
That was, and smaller now, right? iOS definitely hit us. I'm not gonna like that. That was something we definitely had to like adjust. When we were 60 million, it was probably 95% of us that was DTC.
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
A lot of DTC. Amazon is something that we, started growing 3-4 years ago, and it has been very steadily growing. So like that is becoming more and more. I think we're now getting more to like probably the 8%, 10% of the business. And then we have launched, when is it now? Almost 2 years ago already, in Target online already. And then also we're in Target stores. We're in Vitamin Shop, we're in Sprouts. So and I know in Europe things are happening too. In Europe, it has also been more of a focus of just selling more distribution deals, right, with different countries, basically. But in the US, that shift to also, and I think that has become more important, right, with obviously the scale we were at, but also like with the changes that happened online, we're like, okay, like, like getting into store is also a brand marketing play, right? Like getting from like the discovery channel, basically, right, building that up. So that was just a shift we made. I sometimes think we maybe should have done it a little bit earlier. We were relatively late with the skill we were at. But you cannot do everything, which I thought in the beginning you could, but there is a power in focusing at something and becoming really good at it. And you don't have to do everything. I think that's a really important piece. I think it's very important to maybe in the beginning you do a little more, you kind of see what sticks, and then you go deeper, right? And really focus on the things that, that stick, and you become really good at them. And you don't have to become very good at everything.
That's powerful. That is powerful. And this is all with your 20 or so SKUs. You haven't necessarily sort of expanded your SKU count. It's just that focus, right?
Yeah, it's a focus. We did try bars one time because our existing customer base was asking for it. It was just like not... yes, we obviously sold some to the existing customer base, but it was not, we're like, no, we actually don't have to do this. I'm not saying we're never going to expand, right? Like we look at it now more and more also at day parts, right? A lot of our products are being used more in the morning, obviously some also at other parts, but it's still a majority is used in the morning. Where people tend to use more powders in the morning. And if you kind of go through the day, right, end of the day, people tend to use less powders, but are more indulgent, right? Like we all kind of go through that curve where it's like, okay, I do want to have my piece of vegan chocolate at night with my cup of tea.
Exactly. It's been a long day. And at that point in time, your willpower, actually diminishes, later in the day, which is fair.
Exactly. So like, can we do something that is indulgent, but still very healthy and functional and maybe helps you sleep better? Right. So you can actually wake up refreshed. So like there are things we're really, thinking about. Obviously I also always look at my own life too, right? Because I look at my own habits. I'm like, yes, I make 100% my green smoothie in the morning or, my oatmeal. But then at night, right, I do crave that little bit of something, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. So I think it's, still fun things ahead. We're very much focused more and more on females actually too. Naturally, and you don't necessarily see that when you look on the website, but 95% of our customers are female.
95%. Wow.
And they buy it also for the family though. So it doesn't mean men are not using our mixes, right? But our audience is very, very much the female. And to be fair, I think in the health world, I think women are trailblazing. Right. I think they are truly committing to their health, and like they're kind of we're just dragging you guys along, which I think is also totally fine. But we want to go deeper there. One of our mixes, right, Moon Balance, is for hormonal balance. So we also see opportunities within her life, right? For me, also having gone down through pregnancy, and I think menopause is another one, where we really can help women along their health journey, because it is a little different than men. Men are a little more stable, so to say, right? Where women go through a lot of changes throughout their life with their hormones. And it's something I'm personally also very, very passionate about. And I'm excited to like see how we can support her more.
No, I don't think we appreciate women, enough. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and a huge point was made, which I've reflected many times in my life, which is like, women are the only that can bring life, to this world. Women bring life. They determine the next generation of humans, of communities, of people, and they undergo a lot of changes, and we need to sort of appreciate and celebrate that, right?
And one last thing, because I just something I'm always very passionate about, because I 100% agree. And I think it's very interesting, right? Because so one of the things we've introduced in our company is called Moon Days. And that's basically 1 day a month where women, when they have their period, can do whatever they want, right? That can mean you just at work, but it can also mean you take a day off or you cancel all your meetings. It's just you do what you can, basically. And I think a lot of the workplace is still very much, right, built by men, and we women entered the workplace. But it's very much like still like we kind of adjusted to be operating more like men in there. And I think it's like, if I think about the next 10 years in the world and also in the workplace, it's like, how can we as women, right, like show up in the workplace, but also just like truly be in our feminine and not only pretend like we're equal and we're men, right? Because we have to accept we are different, and not just accept it, that should be celebrated, right? Because it's not something bad, like you just said, like we create life. Like, yes, I'm hormonal, and that is actually my superpower, because some weeks I'm very creative and some weeks I'm more this. So it's, I haven't figured it out yet, right? Because like, obviously there's this, it's very easy, like in the way we operate is so masculine, but how can we bring some bit more of the powerful feminine in the workplace as well, and really celebrate it?
It's leadership. It's putting more women like you, giving more opportunity to women to thrive, to lead. And so that empathy is top bottom. That's the only way you can affect change, from top to bottom. So it's really pushing that supply chain of women, empowering girls, I think, to be more than what the stereotypical messaging and stories are saying girls should be. Girls could be anything. And that next generation will change.
I think so.
It will change.
It has been changing, right? So I think it's always important to remember, like if you think 50 years back, like it has been changing, but just because it has been changing, it doesn't mean it has to stop changing now, right? It's like
no.
I talk about periods and all those things, and people are like, "Are you talking about it?" I'm like, "Yeah," and maybe it's not normal now, but it's gonna be normal. Just watch me. It's gonna be normal.
Yeah. The personal situations in which women I know had really high flying corporate jobs, and they go back and their spot's been taken and they just can't settle down and they have to change again. I see it over and over and over again. It's just the way. It's not just the way it is. It's sad. It's the way things are now. But with more empathetic female leaders at the top, those things wouldn't perpetrate themselves, because the pattern is typically their boss is a man. Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, I think sometimes it's also women too. I don't think it's because I think in the business world, right, there are those expectations. So I think sometimes even women in workplaces, right, we adjust to that, and we also can become very hard. So I don't think always the man doing everything wrong, to be honest. I think it's very much the kind of that energy where we then all kind of just start to behave that way. And I think the empathy is needed, and it's the same like with pregnancy leave or going through menopause. I think those are things that we need to talk about more, right? Or periods, like they happen, right? And I think women are extremely powerful and strong, and we are very good in just pretending we're fine and just show up and pretend we're fine. But I think if for a workplace, we could just have more of those very open conversations and, recognize that those things are happening and really like think about how we can actually support women through those times. Yeah, I get it, right? Like if women are out for a year sometimes, in the US, it will never be a year, right? But like I know in Europe, there are countries where, Germany, it's very progressive. It's like a year. Holland's actually only 4 months.
Wow.
So that's pretty short. It's super interesting, and I'm still going kind of through that journey as well. And obviously I started working a little bit, but also not full time. I think there's a power. I think as a mom, you get a lot of things done in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
Because you're like, okay, he's sleeping. Oh my God, I get to do it like this. It's very short amount of time. So I think also more part-time flexible work. I think moms are super powerful, and your mind is still working when you're doing something else. Suddenly solutions come up, right? So it's the 9 to 5, right? That old model. I think that is just not great when you're raising kids. And I think it's like, how can we figure out something else and actually be open for that, right? That would work for women way more. And because I think there are a lot of moms out there that maybe now are a full-time mom, but would love to actually like work a little bit as well. So I think there's just a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thankful for COVID. I was speaking to a neighbor of mine over the weekend, and he was like, he misses the pandemic. Obviously, it's so nuanced, but we connected, as neighbors, over the pandemic. Okay, let's circle back to your super again. And let's talk about what you think the future of like the food and beverage industry is. Just your thoughts, just a very open thought, and e-commerce, its convergence with e-commerce. And the other sort of question I want to loop back in to this is when you went into retail, when you started to do retail, what was the data telling you with regards to your customers, your digital customers supporting you in store?
Yeah, that's two big questions. I think, I mean, food and beverage is interesting. I didn't go. Michael went to Expo West. There was not something that really like kind of blew his mind, or like, oh my God, this is changing. Where I personally would like to see the future go, and where I think it's going to go, but maybe that's just like my very optimistic mind, but I need to have that, is that I hope and see that products are becoming more and more clean. I think the ingredient label is becoming more and more important over the table. And that's something I really talk a lot, actually is one of my huge things in the book too, is like, stop reading this table, start reading what is the actual ingredient list, right? Like what is actually in your food that you're eating. And I think the consumer is changing, and I think brands are either going to get that or not. But I think that is truly what's going to become important. We don't want to have this long ingredient list with a bunch of things in there, but we actually don't know what they are. So I think that's a consumer trend, and obviously that's going to take some time for all consumers to get there, but I think that's moving. And then for us, our online community has been a huge support in retail, even when we launched on Target online and everything. And I think it's very interesting what happens for us being in those stores. They were very excited, where they were like, oh, I know this brand. I've been an early buyer and everything too. But it also made it a little more real for them too, of like, oh, now it's a real brand, right? When you're in retail, it gives you a little bit of that stamp of like, oh, you're not just this online brand, blah, 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 right? But it gives you a little bit more realness, authority of like, okay, they're like a real brand now. So that has been a really funny experience, kind of seeing that. And what is also funny is like, oh, you must be huge, you're sold in Target, where I see the sales numbers in Target and I see the sales numbers online. I'm like, I'm not sure if that's related. So it's that has been, just funny things.
And does packaging actually sort of encourage like customers to continue the journey online? So let's say the discovery point was a Target store, I pick up a tub. How clear is the fact that I could go to yoursuper.com, or do you expect that journey to be siloed to store people who just like physical store experiences?
There's some little nuggets on the packaging where you can kind of go enter the online world. You have to be gentle though, right? You cannot just like, our logo used to be yoursuper.com. Like we had to change that. Like that was not why in retail. So I think it's gentle. I personally love having people in our online world because I get to educate more, right? And like you can, you send them emails where you can educate. It's more personal. I can share more of my story, what works for me, so I always love like sharing pieces of that. But it's yeah, it's a gentle one, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and I also like that your point on the ingredients list is becoming more important, or is more important than the table.
Yeah,
There are like two nutritionists I follow on Instagram. One is Vanny Harry. She's called Food Babe, and she
yeah,
just keeps calling out labels, like, and she sort of gives comparisons with, the UK. This is what this brand looks like in the EU versus this is what the brand looks like in the USA. They say there's no sugar, but these are the other, sugar alternatives are essentially still sugar and still ruin your hormones the same way sugar will, or even worse. And then there's another one called Glucose Queen. I think she's Jessie Ishinapse. I think, if I didn't pronounce her surname, forgive me. She just talks about like insulin spikes. The glycemic index. She sort of has this. It's like a graph, and it's a proprietary graph to her, where she's like, if you eat this, this is what your sugar spike will look like. But if you eat this with this, your sugar spike will lower. I really like those two influencers that are educating me about looking at the ingredients list, rather than just it says 0 calories.
yeah,
That doesn't say anything.
nothing. It's about, I mean, the ingredients list, it's just literally what it means. Know what you're eating,
Yeah,
right? Truly know what you're putting into your body.
yeah,
It's important. And then you also, I mean, and for me, that's the most important first step, because then at least you're conscious about what you're eating, and then it's your decision. And if you feel okay with putting this other stuff in your mouth, like, all good, right? But at least know that it's there and look at it.
yeah, makes sense. Final question before we go into our lightning round. Our lightning round is a segment of the show where I ask you a single question, and if you could answer with a single answer, then we're okay. But this is a final question before we get into that, which is, what's the retention rates like online? And Shopify, you're in Shopify. Did you make the transition in Shopify back in the days, or did you move to Shopify somewhere in 2017, 2016?
We were OG Shopify.
Oh, wow. I feel like we could talk for another hour. I'm just respectful of your time.
Yeah.
But I think we could talk for another hour, but I want to be really respectful of
Maybe
your
we
time.
talk one time about Shopify. Love Shopify. I have been quite a journey with Shopify.
Let's do it.
No, it's yeah. I mean, for us, basically, we were on Shopify. Retention, obviously, super important. We were always somewhere between like a little bit over 30%. And I mean, it's very interesting, because I think we come out of that era, right, where it has been very strong on acquisition focus, and I've definitely been guilty of that as well. And I think right now, we think we're very much in an era of retention first. And retention is fun, right? Because I think it's really the journey of, like, I think if you're going to look at your retention, really first look at who is your customer, trying to understand your customer, because from there you can actually then say, okay, what is the customer journey and how does it need to change based on what I've just learned about my customer, right? So whether that's your email marketing flows, whether that's SMS, but retention is everything. It's your confirmation page, it's the package they're getting, it's every single step of the customer point is actually retention. So I think retention can feel very overwhelming, because I think acquisition is very straightforward, right? You see your numbers and that's it. But I think in retention, there's what is your CX doing? Are they giving surprise experiences? It's one of the biggest opportunity to actually increase your retention. There's so many different buttons you can actually turn if you think about retention. So I invite everyone to just have a lot of fun with that, and pick one area at a time, right? I think at some point we said, hey, let's just do like per month, one deep dive in one area, because if you do it all at the same time, it just can feel like a lot.
It's overwhelming. Yeah. And what's your take on retention at the level of a product? So let's say taste, because some people always talk about retention from a point of view of, it's email marketing. It's going to be your customer support, is the post-purchase experience. It's that. But in food and beverages particularly, having a right taste profile is so important for people to say, okay, actually I'm hooked, not necessarily addicted, but hooked to this taste, and I will buy it again.
I think we're funny in that way, because we're more of a health product. And I'm not saying taste does not have an effect, because I see that some of our better tasting mixes do have a higher retention, but people often buy it first for health, not for taste first. So I think that is an important distinction. But if you think about more of a snack, 100% taste first, right? So super important. How we've looked at it in the past, basically we just do a lot of customer surveys, right? But also really just your reviews and like setting that properly up and actually analyzing that data. We have 2 years ago, we've made some changes to some of the products, not for margin reasons, which all our customers were like, how can you do this just for margins? Like, this was not for margin. This was literally just to, actually make the taste profile better, to make it easier for you to, use those mixes. But a lot of the mixes are used. We have latte mixes, we have smoothie mixes. Some are just in water nowadays. So especially just in water, obviously the taste is more important, but a lot of the more smoothie mixes, you get to kind of decide also how you want to make them taste. And we don't add the sweeteners, right? Because we want people to rather just put a banana to their smoothie if they want to have it sweet, right? Versus making the sweetest, best tasting green powders mix. So it's like, no, we have the most potent, healthiest one. And that has been actually our goal.
Yeah. And then you own the taste, whatever you want to do from a sweetness standpoint. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's jump right into the evergreen lightning, round of questions, or else I would just take another hour of your time.
Yes.
Okay, so what advice would you give to yourself 5 years ago?
5 years ago. Enjoying the ride more. I think it's just enjoy the ride, because it's not about the end game. It's just like truly enjoy the journey and the ride and of building and interacting with customers, building the team and all those things.
So you're deep into outcomes. Okay. Are you a morning person?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does your morning routine look like?
So I had a very set morning routine. With the baby, I've learned to be more flexible.
Bless you.
However, it's still the same, but I'm just more flexible. Drinking water. I meditate. And sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, doesn't really matter. I moved, so that is either I do some Pilates often, just 15, 20 minutes at home very quickly. And I like to just go at least for one walk a day. And then I will quickly journal, just my highlights from the day before. And I read a couple pages in a book, 1-2 pages, that's it. And then I also, and this is quite a lot, I realize what I do actually all these days. They don't have to take a lot of time. But I'll walk, I might listen to some affirmations. I'm a huge fan, and this is more recent, but I listen to affirmations from Louise Hay. I think she's fantastic.
From
and
who?
Louise Hay.
Louise Hay, okay.
She's not there anymore. She passed away, but she's been one of the OGs of affirmation. She's fantastic. To just kind of like get those very positive sentences of how you think about life. Like your belief systems are so important. So huge fan of that. And a huge green smoothie. Or a berry smoothie, but just a big smoothie. And if I'm still hungry, because I'm still nursing, so often also some oatmeal as well.
Super. I like the routine. I would in the show notes I will go through it again. Okay, so I know you're a sports person and you're into sports. What's your favorite team or athlete?
I feel it has always been changing over the years. I mean, right now I still really like Djokovic, because I think he really gets also the food part, right? I think everyone's like, oh my God, how this is. I mean, he's eating different. He is using more holistic healing methods and to really, power up his body. So I think he sets a great example for other athletes as well.
Amazing. What 2 things can't you live without?
Sorry, one more time.
What 2 things can't you live without?
Two things you said, right?
Yeah, 2 things.
Well, I probably should say it's stupid, but actually I can live without my phone. That's not true. Water. I cannot live without water. Good filtered water. Let's put it this way. I don't drink any water. Good filtered water.
Okay.
And I think right now, actually without just my family. because I
Yep.
think that is really like Michael, as well as like being around Leo. It's that's kind of everything. It's most important.
Oh, bless, bless, bless. Okay. What book are you currently reading or listening to?
I forgot the exact title, but I'm reading this book every morning, which I love, and it's from the UK. So maybe you can help me out. It's from the where he interviewed all famous people on their number one advice, which I absolutely love. It's from the founder from.
Not Tim Ferriss, not the
No, I'm
something
gonna.
with
You know
Titans.
what? It's gonna be in the show notes, everyone.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we'll. No worries, no worries, no worries.
great
Final.
book. It's a great book.
Okay. Final question.
Yes.
What's been your best mistake to date? By that, I mean a setback that's given you the biggest feedback.
I think it is. I mean, we've made so many mistakes over the years, but it's probably even just like our biggest setback, which I don't know if it was a mistake, right? But like for Michael being sick was the biggest setback probably in our lives. But actually, if you think about it now, and he always says that, he's like, actually, it was the best day of my life. And so I think that's for anyone, for everyone, it's like your worst day can become your best day, right? So if you're in a time, and I think over the years, more of those moments, not that magnitude, but other moments have happened. But if I now always look back, it's always okay. And I think it's interesting because if you're in the moment itself, sometimes it's hard to see. But what I nowadays tell myself is just like everything happens for a reason. That's like a core belief system of mine. So even when there are low moments, I tell myself that and just kind of trust that only good out of that situation will come. And I think that like really helps you still, like, even when things are not going good in the business. Like I used to be kind of, the business was good, I was good. If the business was bad, I was bad, right? And it's a very unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
And I kind of decoupled that, and actually not even in life or in the business, like whatever is happening, like I can have that very steady emotional line because of, that belief system and that trust.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Kristel. Kristel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the 2X e-commerce show. For those people who want to find out more about your brand, it's Your Super, and we'll link to your book. Yeah, you will link to your book, and we just thank you for coming on to the 2X e-commerce podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was. I do feel we could have talked. We already talked for so long.
This is 1 hour 20 minutes. I'm telling you, if you give me another hour, we'll be. I promise we'll be at it.
Next time, everyone.
Cheers.